When you hear the word peace, what do you picture? Maybe a handshake, a treaty getting signed. But what if real peace, the kind that lasts in the 21st century, isn't a single moment? What if it's more like complex infrastructure? A machine that has to be designed, built, and then operated day in and day out. In this explainer, we're going to pop the hood and deconstruct that very machine. Okay, before we dive in, a really important heads up. The source for this whole discussion is a thought experiment. It's a fictional conversation from a blog that imagines what would happen if you put major thinkers in a room together. So it's not a report on something that actually happened, but it's a fantastic tool for sharpening the kinds of questions we all should be asking.
In this quote from the source's intro, it gets right to the heart of the matter. This one sentence frames our entire conversation today. Are we building a kind of peace that actually empowers people, gives them their voice back, or are we building one that just manages them? That's the big question we're going to keep coming back to.
All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts. Once the fighting stops, a whole new structure has to rise up. The source calls this peace as infrastructure. But, any machine needs an operator. So the first, most basic question has to be, who's in charge here? And this really boils down to one massive question: legitimacy. When some outside group or an unelected committee comes in to rebuild a society, what gives them the right to govern? Is it just their good intentions, their deep pockets, or is it something else entirely? What's so fascinating here is how this slide lays out two totally different ways of thinking about this. On one side, you've got the view of a fictional activist, Miriam al-Masri, who says legitimacy is something you feel. It's knowing you have a voice, that you can hold your leaders accountable, and even fire them if they mess up. But on the other side, you've got the pragmatists, folks like Ajay Banga and Jared Kushner, who argue that legitimacy comes from results, period. If you get the lights back on, create jobs, and stop the bombs, that creates its own kind of buy-in. The source argues that the tension between these two ideas is where everything can either work or just completely fall apart.
And you guessed it, money is a huge part of this puzzle. The source introduces this really powerful idea of a soft occupation. Think about it. Even with the best intentions, billions of dollars in aid are never neutral. Whoever controls that money decides what gets built first. Maybe it's a port for international trade before it's housing for local families. This fundamentally shapes a society's entire future, often without a single vote ever being cast.
So that naturally leads to the next question. If peace is a machine and money is setting its priorities, who are the architects drawing up the blueprints? Well, often they're these incredibly powerful figures, special envoys, foundation board members, who operate completely outside of traditional politics. So are these people a necessary shortcut to get things done, or are they just a clever way to bypass democracy altogether?
This table does a great job of breaking down the difference in accountability. For an elected official, the check on their power is obvious. It's you, the voter. It's the next election. But for these powerful, unelected players, the checks are more like a market. As one character argues, if you get it wrong, you lose credibility. People stop taking your calls. Your access dries up. It's efficient, for sure. But the source asks a tough question. Is it truly accountable to the people who have to live with the fallout?
So the big idea here is that power isn't like a crown you wear anymore. It's more like an operating system, a platform. By aligning all the essential pieces, the money, the security forces, the diplomatic back channels, you build a system that everyone is basically forced to plug into. You don't seize power, you just become the unavoidable infrastructure for getting anything done.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second. We've talked about the mechanics of the peace machine, but what does it feel like to live inside it? The source makes this incredible point that after years of conflict, that first moment of relief can actually be the most dangerous time of all, because there's a huge difference between feeling safe and being safe.
This slide just lays it out perfectly. The source draws a sharp line between real peace and what it calls narrative peace. See, narrative peace is the story you tell the outside world, the press conference, the handshake. It's designed to make everyone feel better, like a sedative. But real peace, that's more like rehab. It's the slow, painful, difficult work of rebuilding trust. And it doesn't make people silent. It actually increases their capacity to deal with hard truths.
It's a crazy paradox, right? How can relief be a bad thing? Well, the source breaks it down into a clear three-step trap. First, you get the big announcement. It's safe now, and everyone, understandably, lets their guard down. Step 2, public attention moves on, so governments and donors start cutting the budgets for boring stuff like oversight and preparedness. And then, Step 3, that new complacency creates the perfect opening for corruption and extremism to creep back in. The very desire for it to be over creates the conditions for it to start again.
And this is where things get really, really big picture.
What happens when a peace plan for one small corner of the world isn't just a one-time fix? What if it's designed from the very beginning to be a prototype, a template that can be copied, pasted, and scaled across the entire globe?
The source uses this old phrase, confirm the covenant, to describe how this scaling happens. And the key word is confirm. This isn't about some big, flashy new treaty that comes out of nowhere. It's about the quiet, behind-the-scenes administrative work of formalizing networks that were already being built. Power isn't locked in with a bang, it's locked in with a binder full of contracts.
So the experts in this roundtable were asked, okay, if this thing goes global, where's the biggest danger? Which part is most likely to become a tool of control? And their answers are pretty chilling. The data layer comes in at number 1. The same tech used to track security threats can easily become a permanent surveillance system. Right behind that is the funding layer, where aid with strings attached becomes a tool for political obedience. And finally, the security layer, where a temporary mission never quite leaves. Which brings us to the one question that really hangs over this whole discussion. When you build a super efficient, scalable machine to deliver help and security, how do you stop it from becoming a global machine for control? What happens when a system that starts with compassion ends up scaling control?
So, this all sounds pretty heavy, right? But the point isn't just to sound the alarm, it's to get smart. The source doesn't leave us hanging. It actually proposes a set of guardrails, critical questions that we, as citizens, journalists, and policymakers, should be asking about any big peace plan.
And here they are. Think of this as your personal checklist for spotting the difference between real help and, well, a soft cage. Is there a public exit strategy with a firm end date? Is every dollar accounted for, out in the open? Do the local people have a real say, a real veto power? Are journalists and whistleblowers protected by law? And is there a rock-solid wall between the military guys and the civilian government? According to the source, these are the guardrails that decide if the machine is building a bridge to freedom or just a more comfortable prison.
And that brings us full circle to the final thought from the source. The promise of peace and safety is so tempting. It makes us want to just relax, trust the experts, and finally fall asleep. But the argument here is that a peace that's actually worth having, one that restores our agency, doesn't ask for our complacency. It demands our vigilance. It requires us to stay awake.